People say you get used to night shifts, used to the silence, the fluorescent lighting, the version of the world that only exists after midnight. Maybe some do. I never did. My name is Noah Mercer, 26 years old back in 2018, and a paramedic working nights at St. Meridian County Hospital in a quiet, fog-covered part of Vermont. A place people rarely noticed unless they needed stitches or CPR. I switched to nights after a breakup that wasn't just bad. It rewired something in me. My ex had gone from affectionate to paranoid in months, eventually locking me in a room during a fight because she believed I was cheating. I wasn't, but reason didn't matter to her. After that, silence felt threatening, doors felt temporary, and sleep came with tension instead of rest. Nights at the hospital were a distraction. Constant motion, emergency sirens, adrenaline. No time to think. My first week there, I met Celeste Ward, the new night receptionist. She was calm, observant, and disarmingly good at reading people. "Let me guess," she said during my second shift. "You're not here for the money. You're hiding from something." I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "I like the quiet." She smirked. "Nobody works nights because they like quiet, Noah." Something about her felt familiar, not in a comforting way, but in a way that made me feel seen, maybe too seen. Still, she was easy to talk to. We bonded over long nights, burned coffee, chaotic emergency calls. She told me she had been ignored most of her life, by parents, friends, partners. She said she understood loneliness like a language. For a while, talking with her felt like relief. And when she asked if we could get coffee after a shift a few weeks later, I said yes. It felt harmless. It never is at the beginning. Dating Celeste wasn't defined by big dramatic moments. Not at first. Things changed in inches, not miles. She started with concerned texts. "Just message me when you get to a call so I don't worry." Then, "Can you call me on break? I miss hearing your voice." It sounded sweet, affectionate. After years of feeling like background noise, being someone's priority felt good. But the requests grew. She asked for my live location, saying it made her feel grounded. She questioned every female coworker I spoke to. She showed up on nights she wasn't scheduled, lingering with coffee she claimed was just because. One night around 3 a.m., I was joking with one of the nurses, nothing intimate. Just the exhausted humor ER workers rely on. When I turned, Celeste was there, watching silently. Later, she said flatly, "You laugh differently with her." I brushed it off as insecurity. Everyone carried scars. But soon she was crying if I didn't respond immediately. She accused me of pulling away if I didn't text first. When I tried to slow things down, she whispered, "Everyone leaves me. Don't be like them." Part of me pitied her. Part of me felt trapped. But the more I tried to gently create space, the tighter she clung. One night she said, "If you ghost me, I swear I'll make people see who you really are." I didn't fully register it as a threat. I should have. The night everything shifted was cold, raining hard enough to blur the parking lot lights into smears. I'd just finished a double shift, 14 hours of trauma, exhaustion, and sickly hospital air. All I wanted was sleep. As I walked toward my car, Celeste stepped out from behind an ambulance bay, hair soaked, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Noah," she said, voice trembling, "why didn't you text me back?" "I was working," I answered carefully. "You weren't too busy to talk to her." "There is no her, Celeste. She's a coworker." Her expression changed, like something unhinged beneath the surface finally cracked through. "Give me your phone." "No." She reached for it. When I stepped back, she slapped me, hard. My body froze, not from pain, but from recognition. I'd been here before. Without another word, I got into my car and locked the doors. She pounded on the window, shouting, crying, begging, accusing. I drove away. heart racing. The next morning, I blocked her everywhere in a... Friends told me I did the right thing. I wanted to believe them. 2 days later, around 2 a.m., a man walked into the hospital asking for me. Tall, tattooed, furious. "Where's Noah Mercer?" he demanded. I stepped into view slowly. "I'm Noah." He got close. Too close. "You think you can treat her like garbage?" "Who?" "Celeste." My stomach dropped. He shoved his phone at me. Photos of me with coworkers cropped to look romantic. Texts I never sent. Screenshots that made me look like a manipulative creep. Celeste had told him I stalked her, harassed her, and wouldn't leave her alone. "I'm giving you one chance to apologize to her face," he growled. I stepped back, radioing for security. "You're scared now?" he barked. "You should be." Security escorted him out, but that didn't stop him. When I clocked out at 4:11 a.m., he was waiting near my car. "You're done," he snarled before smashing my windshield with a tire iron. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Police arrived fast and arrested him. During questioning, Ronan insisted he was defending Celeste, that she told him I manipulated and threatened her. I provided evidence, messages, timelines, statements. The officers believed me. Restraining orders were filed against both of them. At the hearing, Celeste cried, acted confused, tried to paint herself as the victim. But her messages to Ronan, screenshots of fake threats, fabricated texts, told the truth. The judge granted the restraining orders. She didn't look at me as she left the courtroom. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was uncertainty. Months passed. Winter thawed. My windshield was replaced. My routine stabilized. Celeste and Ronan moved on, or at least disappeared from my world. But I didn't forget. Trauma rarely disappears. It just becomes quieter, waiting until something reminds you. I stayed on night shift, not because I needed to hide anymore, but because I understood something most people didn't. At 3 a.m., boundaries blur. People form attachments out of loneliness rather than compatibility. They mistake attention for love, intensity for connection. One night, a new hire, a nurse named Emily, sat beside me during break. "People say night shift changes you," she said. "Is that true?" I thought about Celeste, about the rain, about the smashed windshield, about how easy it had been to ignore early warning signs because they looked like affection. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It changes you." She tilted her head. "How?" "You learn that not everyone looking for comfort is harmless. Some people cling because they're afraid of losing control, not because they care." Emily swallowed, listening closely. "And if someone asks you to give up pieces of your independence to make them feel secure," I added, "it's not connection, it's control." She nodded slowly, taking the words seriously. When my shift ended, I stepped outside. Fog hovered over the empty roads. Pine trees lined the edge of the parking lot. The air was cold, still, clean. For the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel threatening. It felt earned. It felt like peace. Love is not urgency, control, panic, access, or fear. Love respects boundaries. Obsession violates them. Listen to your intuition early, because the person who seems like comfort at midnight may become the reason you fear the dark. I didn't end up at the Gray Line Motel because I wanted a fresh start or sought peace in the middle of nowhere. I landed there because life cornered me. After my mother died, the hospital bills buried me deeper than grief ever could. Then the printing company I worked for folded, and suddenly I was living out of my car, applying for jobs I never would have considered when life still made sense. A friend told me about a deserted roadside motel off Highway 57. The kind of place that doesn't ask many questions, he said. That was true. The owner, Halpern, was a thin man with nervous eyes who hired me 3 minutes after I walked in. Night shift, low pay, almost no guests. Perfect for someone trying to disappear. Before handing me the keys, he pulled me aside. "One thing you need to know," he said. "Don't open room 14. Don't touch the attic hatch above it, ever." I actually laughed. He didn't. He explained that decades earlier, a maintenance worker fell through a rotten board in the attic, shattered his legs, and died crawling around up there before anyone found him. Since then, guests reported hearing footsteps in 14 long after the attic had been bolted shut. Eventually, Halpern sealed the room entirely to stop complaints. That should have been my cue to turn around. But when you're broke, warnings feel like background noise. For weeks, my shifts were uneventful. A few truckers, a few travelers, plenty of silence. Winter arrived early that year, swallowing Montana under snow. The motel creaked constantly in the wind, but I learned to ignore it. Upsetting things always start small. February 9th was the kind of night you don't forget. A blizzard hammered the highway, turning the motel into an island of dim lights and howling wind. Only 3 rooms were occupied. I sat behind the front desk, sipping burnt coffee, trying to keep warm and awake. At 12:17 a.m., the front desk phone rang. It startled me. Those phones rarely rang at all. I lifted the receiver. "Gray Line Motel, reception." A soft voice whispered, "We need new sheets in room 14. My first thought was simple disbelief. Room 14 wasn't occupied. It wasn't even available. "Sorry, did you say 14? "Yes," the voice whispered. "Bring them." Then the call disconnected. Logic told me it was a prank. But my job was to check complaints, even strange ones. So I grabbed a clean set of sheets and walked across the snowy walkway toward room 14. The door was cracked open. My stomach tightened, but I pushed it gently. The hinges groaned as if unused in years. The cold inside hit me fast, way colder than any other room. The bed looked recently slept in. The sheets twisted and damp, as if someone had been lying there moments earlier. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, measured, directly above me. The attic. I stared up at the sealed hatch. It was bolted shut, dusty, untouched. Yet something heavy moved behind it, not the skittering of an animal. These footsteps had weight, a pattern, a limp. Trying to convince myself I was imagining it, I changed the sheets fast. Then the phone rang. The phone in room 14, the one that had no power, no wiring, no service. I answered it, because fear makes you do stupid things. "Hello?" The same soft voice whispered, "Come upstairs. Bring the sheets." A long breath followed, wet, dragging. The attic hatch creaked above me. Dust rained down in thin streams. Something pressed against the wood from the other side, slow and deliberate, testing the bolts. That was enough. I backed out, heart pounding, then sprinted back to the office and shut myself inside. When the storm thinned momentarily, I looked toward the motel building. The attic window, dark for decades, now glowed faintly from within. A silhouette stood behind it, crooked and leaning forward, as if listening for something. For me. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I called the sheriff. Sheriff Fallon was a calm, solid man who acted like nothing surprised him anymore. Still, when he heard my story, he raised an eyebrow, but he humored me. We entered room 14 together. The air inside remained unnaturally cold. Fallon looked around, frowning. "You sure no one else has keys?" "No one," I said. He checked the locked phone. "This hasn't worked in years." Then he aimed his flashlight at the attic hatch. The bolts were still in place, but the dust around them wasn't. Drag marks streaked across the wood. Not scratches, not claw marks, just wide, persistent smears, as if something underneath had been brushing or pulling against it. Fallon exhaled. "Let's open it." I wanted to object. My body wanted to run. But I stood still as he removed the bolts and lowered the hatch. The smell hit first. Old wood, damp insulation, something metallic underneath it all. The beam from Fallon's flashlight revealed what I'd feared. Footprints. human, bare, large, and behind them, long drag marks, two parallel streaks trailing across the dusty boards, like someone with useless legs had pulled themselves through the space. Fallon swallowed. These are fresh. That was the moment he told me the old story wasn't just folklore. The maintenance worker, Elliot Greaves, had died crawling. Witnesses who found him said he dragged his legs behind him for hours, leaving patterns just like these. Attempts to renovate the attic stopped after multiple workers claimed they heard someone crawling nearby. We searched the motel inch by inch, but nothing turned up. Whatever had moved through the attic was gone, or hiding. Sheriff Fallon closed the hatch. "This place has history," he said quietly. "History people didn't deal with." He advised me to quit. I didn't need to think long. I planned to work one final night so I could get my last paycheck. Looking back, that was my biggest mistake. The storm returned even worse than before, slamming the motel with wind that rattled the walls. The only guest checked in was asleep by 10. By 11:30, the whole building felt too quiet. At midnight, the front desk phone rang. I knew what it was. I still answered. "Reception?" I whispered. Static. A long, dragging breath. Then, "Bring the sheets." I hung up so fast the bell inside the phone rattled. Every light in the office flickered. The temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath. Then, the motel's power went out. The sudden silence felt alive. The kind of silence that isn't absence, more like listening. Slow footsteps creaked across the walkway outside. Approaching. Stopping in front of the office door. I held my breath. A figure leaned against the glass, backlit by lightning, bent, twisted, its legs dragging behind it. It stayed there, unmoving. Then, with a faint tap on the window, it whispered, "Upstairs." Not loud, not angry, almost pleading. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. When I ran out the back door, the wind almost shoved me aside, but the walkway stood empty, completely untouched. No footprints, no disturbed snow. The footsteps I'd heard hadn't come from outside, they'd come from above, inside the structure, within the motel itself. That night I packed what little I had and left before dawn. 2 weeks later, Gray Line Motel closed for good. Halpern boarded it up and vanished from town. I moved 3 towns away, then eventually to another state. I found steady work at a garage, kept my head down, and tried to rebuild the parts of my life that still worked. But the nights remained difficult. Sometimes I'd hear faint dragging sounds if the house settled wrong. Sometimes I'd wake to footsteps in the hall, only to remember I lived alone. But the worst reminder came exactly 1 year later. Another February storm, another unknown number on my phone. I answered without thinking. Static, a dragging breath, and a whisper, "Bring the sheets." My stomach clenched. I threw the phone across the room. Next morning I switched numbers. Didn't matter. The next year the call came again. From another unknown number, always during the storm, always the same message. I tried ignoring it, tried believing it was coincidence. But some things don't chase logic. Some things chase you. The calls continue every year, each time just one, each time the same whisper, the same breath that sounds like someone dragging themselves across a dusty floor. I haven't returned to Montana, haven't driven near Highway 57, but sometimes, in the dead of winter, when snow hits the roof just right, I hear faint creaking above me. Not footsteps, just the slow, desperate drag of something that remembers me and waits. When something feels wrong, trust yourself. Fear is sometimes a warning, not a weakness. Not every call should be answered, and not every door should be opened, especially the ones you're told to leave alone. People always say insomnia makes you dramatic, that you overreact because your nerves are thin and your brain never shuts off. Maybe they're right. Or maybe insomnia just strips away the noise most people hide behind. What I do know is this. When I accepted the night shift archivist job at Merriman Public Library in Portland, Maine, I wasn't looking for excitement. I just wanted quiet. a routine. After my parents died 8 years earlier, I quit writing, floated between odd jobs, and disappeared from my own life. My therapist finally suggested structure, real structure. So when Merriman posted a graveyard shift position, I took it. The building was older than most libraries. Heavy stone exterior, tall stained glass windows, creaking wooden floors. The air always smelled like dust and old paper, which I liked. During training, the head librarian, Mrs. Langford, gave me the rundown. Returns, catalog updates, motion logs, temperature checks. Straightforward. Except for one rule. When we passed the elevator panel, she rested her finger near an unlabeled button. "Basement level 3, I said. "What's down there?" She paused longer than normal before answering. "Storage. That floor isn't used anymore. And after 2 a.m., don't go down there. The humidity sensors malfunction. You'll get false alarms." Her tone was casual, but her hands trembled. I laughed it off. Old buildings always have stories. My first solo shift began March 4th, 2026. At 1:23 a.m., the motion alarm chimed softly. On screen, "Unauthorized access, basement L3. A cold feeling washed over me. Not fear, just unease. When I clicked the camera feed, the monitor flickered to static. Protocol said I had to investigate, so I swiped my badge and took the service elevator down. Halfway, the lift jolted violently, lights flickering like the building was struggling for power. When the doors opened, it wasn't on level 3. It stopped at level 2. The hallway was dim and silent. That's when I heard it. A book closing. Slow, heavy, downstairs. My heartbeat stumbled. I tried calling Mrs. Langford, but my phone immediately lost all signal. Part of me wanted to go back upstairs and pretend I never saw the alert, but I pushed open the stairwell door and went down. The moment I reached level 3, the air changed. It was colder, unnaturally cold. My breath fogged. The floor was covered with books. Not fallen, arranged. Circles, spirals, lines, patterns I didn't understand. At the center was a journal, thick brown leather, dated 1894. It wasn't in the catalog. Against better judgment, I opened it. The first page read, "Let him rest. He does not like to be read." Before I could blink, the light snapped off. Pitch black. Then, behind me, fabric dragging on stone. Slow, deliberate movement. I lifted my phone for light. "Hello?" My voice barely sounded like mine. For a second, there was only silence. Then, right beside my ear, "Close the book." Not loud, not angry, just a whisper, a warning. I dropped the journal and ran back toward the stairwell. The door didn't open at first. It felt like someone was holding it shut. I hit it with my shoulder until the latch gave, and I slammed it closed behind me. Something tapped the other side. 3 soft knocks. Not trying to break through, just reminding me it was there. Back upstairs. The library should have felt safe, familiar. Instead, every light flickered. Then motion alerts began firing across the monitor. History wing, reading hall, archives, children's room, fiction. Every section showed movement, but I was alone. Then the humming started, coming through the ventilation ducts. Low and rhythmic, like someone trying to mimic a lullaby without understanding music. The lights began turning off aisle by aisle, closing in behind me. Not random, guiding me. The only pathway left lit led to the children's reading room. Bright murals now looked unsettling under the flickering emergency lights. "I'm not going down there," I whispered. But the darkness kept closing in until I had no choice. I sprinted down the hall and locked myself inside the children's room. At first, silence, then tapping. Soft fingertips tapping the glass wall. Not a fist, not force. Curiosity. Testing. More hands joined, tapping in uneven patterns, as if excited or impatient. I crouched behind a shelf, breath stuttering. Finally, in one desperate motion, I cracked open a small emergency window, climbed out, and fell into the rain. My knees hit pavement hard, but adrenaline kept me moving. I didn't stop running until I reached the diner across the street. The waitress dialed the police before I asked. When officers searched the library, I expected chaos. Instead, everything was perfectly neat. Shelves full, no books on the floor, no journal, no broken locks. The only abnormality: the humidity sensors on L3 were destroyed, melted as if exposed to extreme heat. Mrs. Langford arrived shortly after the officers. When she saw me, she didn't ask if I was okay. She just asked, "Did you open anything?" I didn't answer. She nodded like that was enough. By the next morning, she resigned. I quit the same day. For weeks, I told myself none of it was real. I blamed insomnia, stress, memory filling gaps it shouldn't. I took a job at a daytime bookstore and forced myself back into a routine. Early mornings, sunlight, normal life. But sometimes, walking home past dark windows or old brick buildings, I heard the humming again. Soft at first, then louder if I paused too long. I saw movement too. Reflections that shouldn't exist. A tall figure standing perfectly still, watching from somewhere just out of focus. If I blinked, it disappeared. If I kept staring, the humming grew louder. So I stopped looking. Sleep didn't return. Not really. I slept with the lights on, TV humming background noise, locks triple-checked. But fear doesn't fade just because you deny it. Sometimes denial feeds it. A month after I resigned, a package was waiting at my door. No postage, no return address, just my name. Inside, the leather journal. The one from basement level 3. The page I had read now looked different, like freshly rewritten ink sat over the old letters. "You should have closed it." My throat tightened. I flipped to the back. A new message filled the last page, written in dark, wet ink. "He remembers you." As I stared at the words, something shifted outside. Slow, dragging footsteps along the hallway carpet. Then the humming. Closer, right outside the door. 3 knocks, soft, patient. I backed away, gripping the journal even though I knew I should have dropped it. The humming stopped. Silence. But I knew that wasn't the end. Some things don't leave once you've seen them. Some doors don't close once you've opened them. Not all knowledge is meant to be uncovered. Some mysteries exist to be left alone, not because truth is dangerous, but because curiosity can wake things that should never be disturbed. Sometimes, the real threat isn't what waits in the dark. It's believing the dark will never look back. They say silence heals the mind. Like if you sit in it long enough, the noise inside you finally quiets. They're wrong. Silence doesn't heal you. It exposes you. That's why I took the night shift at Route 79 Fuel and Rest, a lonely gas station in the middle of the New Mexico desert. No houses, no traffic after midnight. Nothing but sand, distant highway lines, and sky. I didn't choose this job because I needed money. I chose it because I needed distance, from memory, from guilt, from people. Before this, I worked overseas as a private security contractor. Not military, not civilian, somewhere in between. My closest friend, Foster, got killed during a night ambush. I held pressure on the wound and lied to him, told him he'd be fine. He wasn't. After that, sleep became something other people had. Noise stayed with me. Gunfire, shouting. The wet sound of someone choking on their own breath. My fiancée tried to stay, but trauma doesn't just take the person who suffers. It takes everyone around them. So here I was, middle of nowhere, working through the night, trying not to remember anything. Most nights were calm. A few truckers, some teenagers buying snacks, maybe someone passing through on their way toward Phoenix or Santa Fe. Nothing unusual, but December 3rd, 1998. My fifth shift. That's when quiet turned into something else. It was 2:13 a.m. when the payphone outside started ringing. A sharp metallic ring that cut through the stillness like a blade. Normally, a ringing phone wouldn't matter, except this one had been disconnected for 6 years. No wires, no service. I stared at it through the window. The receiver swayed gently, like someone had just let go. For a few seconds, I stood frozen, not afraid, just unsure what rules applied now. Eventually, the ringing stopped. Then the office landline rang. No calls were supposed to come through after midnight. I picked up slowly. Route 79. Silence. Then breathing. Slow, controlled, steady. Hello? Who is this? More breathing. Then a whisper. So soft, I almost thought I imagined it. Don't hang up. He hasn't left yet. My skin tightened. For the first time in years, I felt the same instinct I had in combat. Something was hunting someone. Maybe me. But the line went dead before I could speak again. That's when I noticed something on the monitor. A truck, a blue pickup, and a man getting out. One I'd already met once tonight. He first showed up around 1:27 a.m. Tall, thin, dusty boots, wrinkled denim jacket. He had the kind of posture that suggested he'd been traveling a long time or waiting even longer. He walked inside and looked around, not at the shelves, the drinks, or the food, but at me. You open? He asked. Yeah, he nodded slowly. Quiet night. That's how it is out here. He grabbed a bottle of water and placed it on the counter. When I reached for it, he leaned forward. You're here alone? I kept my expression neutral. Company policy says not to answer personal questions. He smirked, like he appreciated the answer, not like it stopped him. Name's Miles. I didn't offer mine. Still, he read it off the name tag. Caleb. The way he said it, soft, drawn out, felt like he was testing how it sounded in his mouth. Then he left. But 30 minutes later, he came back. Forgot gum. Then again. Truck's making a weird sound. Except when he turned the key in the ignition. The engine ran smooth as a plane. By his third visit, my nerves weren't subtle anymore. My hands sat closer to the drawer where we kept a crowbar. Before his final exit, he asked casually, So, where do you stay? Haven't seen any houses nearby. My stomach tightened. He couldn't have known that. There was only one way he could have figured it out. He'd memorized my license plate. He smiled. Not warm, not friendly. The kind of smile people practice in mirrors or morgues. See you soon, Caleb. He walked out, but the feeling didn't go with him. The desert wind picked up around 3. Sand blew across the asphalt like mist. The lights outside flickered like they were struggling against the dark. I checked the security monitors again. Feed 1. Gas pumps. Feed 2. Entrance. Feed 3. Backlot. Feed 3 flickered again, like someone was walking just outside the camera's range. I leaned closer. A figure stood near the dumpsters. Not moving, not shifting, just watching. My mouth dried. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The air smelled like cold metal and dust. My boots crunched on gravel, but nothing else made a sound. Not wind, not animals, not trucks in the distance. I scanned the area. No man, no prints, no truck. Just silence again. When I returned inside, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 4:11 a.m., the cracked rhythm of the night shattered. Glass exploded inward. The front door broke into glittering shards. A rock rolled to a stop across the tile. I didn't run. Training kicked in before fear could. Crowbar in hand, back against the wall. Eyes scanning. No footsteps approached. The desert was empty again. But when I retreated toward the stockroom, the closet door caught my eye. It was cracked open, and inside, on the floor, A hunting knife. Sand stuck to the handle. The same fine, pale sand Miles tracked in earlier. Someone had been hiding in that closet. Not for seconds, for hours. I replayed the security tape. The footage looked grainy, but clear enough to recognize movement. There I was, leaving the front counter to check the rear lot. 2 seconds later, the back door opened. Miles slipped inside. Slow, lowered posture, body angled like someone trained to avoid cameras. He moved without sound, without hesitation. He looked around the store, scanning everything. Exits, pathways, blind spots. Then he turned, slowly, toward the camera. No blink, no expression, just eyes, wide and fixed, like prey pretending to be predator. Then he walked toward the stockroom. No panic, no rush, as if he knew he still had time. When the footage ended, my chest felt tight. Someone like that doesn't mess around. They don't vandalize. They don't play pranks. They hunt. I called the police. They arrived fast, but the desert erases footprints and tire marks within minutes. No sign of forced entry, no knife, no rock, nothing. One officer gave a half laugh, trying to diffuse tension. "Probably someone passing through. You'll be fine." But the other officer looked at me differently. His eyes lingered. He knew I wasn't imagining it, but he also knew evidence meant more than instinct. They left too soon. When the sky finally shifted from black to pale blue, I locked up, clocked out, and walked to my truck with the crowbar still in hand. The sun crawled up behind the mountains like it was hesitating. I drove slow, scanning the rearview mirror every mile. At first there was nothing, just road and heat ripples. Then, 5 miles out, under one of the only working streetlights along Route 79, someone stood perfectly still, tall, thin, hands at sides, head tilted slightly. Miles. His clothes blew gently in the wind, but he didn't step forward. He didn't lift a hand. He didn't shout. He just watched. Like the night hadn't ended, like the game wasn't over, like I was still on shift. My hands tightened around the wheel. My body wanted to speed up, but something deeper, older, told me not to. Predators chase what runs. So I drove on, slow, steady, never breaking eye contact until distance swallowed him. But even after he disappeared from the mirror, the feeling stayed, the same realization I felt in combat. The danger wasn't gone. It was waiting. And sometimes, the scariest thing isn't a man trying to break in, it's a man patient enough not to. Not all threats shout or rush. Some learn your name, study your habits, and wait for silence to do the work. Fear isn't always the scream in the night. Sometimes, it's the watchful stranger who never stops showing up. And some people don't disappear when morning comes. They just wait for the next dark place where you think you're finally alone. Most people imagine Arizona as desert and dust. But Evergreen Pass on the outskirts of Flagstaff is mostly dark pines, long miles of nothing, and the kind of cold night air that feels older than the land itself. In January 2021, after my photography career fizzled and my parents' divorce split our family like a cracked foundation, I found myself taking the graveyard shift at the Pine Ridge Train Depot. Address, 744 Evergreen Pass. Engraved above the doors like it mattered to someone. I rented a cramped one-bedroom next to a highway where trucks roared past all night, shaking the windows. The depot felt like escape, a place so empty you could actually hear your own thoughts. Most nights, the trains barely slowed. Freight rolled through like ghosts. I was the only station assistant on duty after midnight, responsible for logs, safety checks, and staying awake. The building, though, had personality. Not the friendly kind. It creaked constantly. Shadows pooled in corners. Once, I watched a ceiling camera glitch like someone walked across the lens, even though the platform outside was empty. I told myself it was bad wiring. Then Dorian Hale arrived. He showed up on my third week, tall, pale, hair cut with military precision, and polite in a way that felt memorized. "Night maintenance worker," he introduced himself, shaking my hand with a strangely cool grip. "Just transferred." He asked questions no one ever asked. How many passengers usually pass through after midnight? Who checks the platform when you're alone? How fast do the emergency shutters close? I shrugged them off, figuring he was learning the job. But he would watch me work. Closely. Too closely. And when he finally spoke beyond small talk, it was about train accidents, bodies going quiet, people vanishing during night shifts. He said it academically, like a man discussing weather patterns. I laughed it off. He didn't. That was the first night I felt something uneasy settling in my stomach. Something telling me Pine Ridge might not be the quiet refuge I'd hoped for. Something telling me I wasn't alone out here in the trees. The things that bothered me at first were small enough to excuse. A storage closet left open with heavy chains inside, even though I had locked it the night before. A maintenance cart parked in front of the emergency exit when I knew it hadn't been there during my rounds. A camera feed showing Dorian standing perfectly still and staring directly into the lens, not blinking, not moving, for almost 4 minutes. When I mentioned it to him, he smiled with that stiff, too careful expression. "Just checking blind spots," he said. His conversations grew stranger. When I asked him about his past jobs, he told me he'd worked in freight repair. "Long shifts," he said. "Quiet places. Sometimes people disappear into the quiet." One windy night I found him on the empty platform, leaning close to the tracks like listening for something underground. He whispered, "Tonight would be perfect. No witnesses." My chest tightened. "You talking to me?" He jumped slightly, then plastered on a smile. "Sorry. Talking to the trains." I couldn't tell if he meant it as a joke. Still, I tried to keep the peace. Jobs were hard to come by. My bank account was shrinking. And even though I knew something was off, I told myself people were allowed to be weird. Then I found him looping heavy chains around a support beam in the loading bay. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Testing how fast I can secure all exits," he said, holding out a stopwatch. "Time me." I pretended to, but dread crawled along my spine. Later, as I cleaned the office, I realized the emergency shutter controls had been tampered with. The screws were loose. One panel looked pried open. When I checked the camera feeds again, the platform glitch from earlier repeated itself. Except this time, the shape passing the lens looked tall, human tall. And I knew the building's only other occupant was somewhere in the dark with me. The night everything broke open. The weather came in angry. Pine branches slammed against the depot's siding. The lights flickered in nervous pulses. My radio hissed with static. The whole building seemed to hold its breath. I was doing rounds when the first emergency light kicked on, red and slow, like a heartbeat. The power dipped long enough to shut off the cameras. When they rebooted, every hallway feed showed the same thing: Dorian walking into the boiler room. I didn't want to follow, but the alternative, standing alone in the office waiting for him to come find me, felt worse. The boiler room was a furnace-lit cavern of humming pipes. The moment I stepped in, I noticed a crude map taped to the wall. A map of the depot. Every exit circled in thick marker. My office marked with an X, and beside it, in block letters, "Begin here." My stomach dropped clean through me. Footsteps sounded behind me. Dorian closed the door with a soft click. He held a crowbar loosely, like it belonged in his hand. "Storm nights," he said, staring past me. "They bring out the thoughts. Makes you wonder how fast everything would fall apart if someone started the chain reaction." "I think you're misunderstanding something," I said shakily. "No." He smiled without warmth. "I think you finally understand perfectly." I kept my eyes low, pretending to misread his tone. "You mean emergency prep drills, right? HR training stuff?" He blinked. "Just once." "Yes," he said slowly. "Training." That hesitation gave me the window I needed. I stepped sideways, pretending to study the pipes, then bolted out the door hard enough to feel the wind tear at my jacket. I didn't stop running until I slammed my office door and locked it. My hands shook as I dialed my supervisor. He didn't believe me at first. But when I mentioned the crowbar and the map, his tone changed fast. He called the police. I stayed locked in that office, heart pounding, until dawn bled into the sky. When officers arrived, Dorian stood quietly near the loading bay. Calm, cooperative. He admitted to making the map, staging scenes, blocking exits. Said he was studying fear responses. He stared at me the entire interview. "Was it you who told?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. His smile was thin. Thought so. HR didn't know what to do with someone who admitted everything but hadn't technically done anything harmful. They scheduled him for review, which meant he worked 2 more night shifts. The decision made my skin crawl. Even the day staff looked uneasy around him. He didn't speak to me again, not once. But every time he passed me in the hall, he watched me with that quiet, calculating expression, like he was memorizing something. On his second review night, he vanished. His locker stood open, neatly cleaned out. His boots were gone. Vest folded like a flag. No note, no message, no sign he'd packed in a hurry. It looked ceremonial. The police swept the area. K9 units searched the surrounding forest. Nothing. A freight operator from a nearby junction later told officers he'd seen a tall, barefoot man walking down the tracks at 4 a.m., pale as moonlight, shirt hanging open in the cold. But no one confirmed it. The depot didn't shut down, but something in me did. Even with the lights bright and staff bustling around, the building felt wrong, like the walls remembered him. I resigned the next week. My supervisor didn't argue. My last night there, I stood on the platform and listened to a freight train howl through without slowing. The wind off it rattled every bolt and panel. For a heartbeat, I swore I saw someone standing at the far end of the platform, thin, still, watching me. But when I blinked, the space was empty. I walked away without looking back. Life after the depot didn't improve overnight. My apartment still rattled with trucks. My parents still lived separate lives. My photography gear sat in a plastic bin because I didn't have the energy to try again. But something inside me had changed. Fear had shape now, a face, a name, and I had learned to listen to it. Some nights, when a freight train passes on the distant tracks, the horn cutting through the dark, I think about Dorian Hale walking somewhere in the cold, maybe down another rail line, maybe into another quiet job where no one questions why he asks about exits. I picture him waiting on some empty platform for a night with no witnesses. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run, if I hadn't locked that office door, if I hadn't called for help. Then the train horn fades, and I remind myself, I left. I survived. I listened to the voice in my head that said something was wrong. And maybe that's the only reason I'm still here. Trust your instincts, especially when something feels quietly, deeply wrong. Ignoring danger doesn't make it disappear. Sometimes the one thing that saves your life is the courage to listen to fear before it becomes reality. Some people work night shifts because they like quiet. I worked them because quiet scared me, and I wanted to beat it. My name is Jonas Hale, and before I became a night ranger in Hollow Ridge Forest, I worked as a cook at a diner that burned down while I was on shift. Some nights, I still wake up sure I smell smoke or hear someone screaming for help. After the fire, crowds became suffocating. City noise sent my nerves into overdrive. I needed distance, space, air that hadn't been recycled through trauma. A small forest town in Vermont seemed like a good place to disappear. The ranger job wasn't glamorous. Trail checks, wildlife reports, occasional lost tourist. But the quiet woods felt safer than my memories did. I wasn't alone on the night shift. Elias Dorn, a veteran ranger in his 50s, worked beside me. He was the kind of man who rarely explained anything unless he had to. Locals trusted him and treated him like someone who'd seen things worth respecting. My third week on the job, the radio crackled to life. Missing party, adult male, 1 juvenile. Last known location, near mile marker 7. Possible deviation onto old logging path. Elias froze for half a second before answering. Then he looked at me and said something that didn't feel like a joke. If the woods start talking, don't answer. I stared at him. Talking? He didn't elaborate. He just strapped on his pack and headed for the trailhead. If I'd listened to my instincts, maybe I would have turned around that night. But people only fear warnings after they understand them. The forest felt strange as soon as we started moving. No insects, no birds. Just wind sliding through trees like something hiding behind them held its breath. Flashlights caught fog drifting low across the path, thick enough to blur distance. After about 90 minutes, the trail changed. The ground dipped unnaturally, almost carved rather than eroded. "This part isn't on any map," I whispered. "It's not supposed to be," Elias replied. My mind flashed to the radio call, the missing father and son. Somewhere beyond that fog, a kid could be scared or hurt. We kept walking. Eventually, something appeared through the trees, a building. At first glance, it looked like an old hunting cabin, but the wood wasn't rotten. The roof wasn't sagging. It looked wrong. Not new, but untouched by time. Symbols were etched into the doorway, sharp, uneven marks like someone carved them in anger. "Is this where they were headed?" I asked. "No one heads here," Elias said quietly. "They get pulled here." Inside, the cabin smelled like rot and burnt herbs. A lantern flickered above us, still burning even though no one should have been there. Then we found the body. A man slumped against the wall, dried and shriveled like he'd been dead for months. But his gear was modern. GPS clipped to his belt, thermal jacket, new boots. His eyelids were stitched shut with black thread. A leather journal sat beside him. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The first line was written with shaky, desperate pressure. "Caleb is gone." Something whispered his name. "The cabin won't let us leave." I read it quietly, but aloud. Elias grabbed the journal so fast it startled me. "Never speak anything written in a place like this," he hissed. My mouth went dry. "Why?" He answered with the first vulnerable sentence I'd heard from him. "Because this place listens." We moved deeper into the cabin. Every doorway felt too dark. Every hallway seemed longer than before. I couldn't shake the feeling that the architecture was changing behind us. Just when I thought the silence would crush me, we heard it. A trembling, quiet voice, coming from deeper inside. "Dad!" My heart kicked. "Elias," I whispered. "That's him. The kid." Elias didn't move. His face didn't soften. "That's not a child. It sounds like one. It wants to sound like one." I shook him off and took a step toward the hallway, flashlight trembling in my hand. The voice came again, closer this time, breaking into a sob. "Please, help me." Instinct pulled me forward. I wasn't thinking about warnings or stitched eyes or bodies rotting without time. My brain saw one thing, a kid calling for help. I was 2 steps from the hall before Elias grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Jonas, look at the wall." He pointed his beam to a section of wood near the floor. Words were carved there, dozens, some overlapping. "Don't speak to her. She takes them." The voice is a door. First word you give is permission. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. Before I could react, something exhaled inches from my ear. A woman's whisper, soft, sweet, and wrong. "Jonas." The flashlight flickered. Elias didn't hesitate. "We're leaving, now." We began backing toward the entrance. The cabin groaned. A low, moaning sound like wood bending under pressure. The hallway stretched, Rooms shifted. Shadows moved without any source. Something grabbed the back of my jacket, cold fingers closing around fabric. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Elias pulled me so hard I nearly fell. We stumbled out the doorway and into the forest like breaking surface after nearly drowning. Only when the cabin was swallowed by trees did I realize I was shaking. "What was that?" I asked. "A mistake," Elias said. "We were too deep. Too late." "And the Mercers?" His silence was answer enough. Back at the ranger station, everything felt too normal. The fluorescent lights, the radio static, the coffee maker humming. It all should have grounded me. But something from that cabin clung to us. Elias placed the journal on the metal table and stared at it like it might move. "We destroy it," I said. He shook his head. "Books tied to places like that sometimes carry the place with them. Burning it could open something instead of ending it. So, what do? Contain it." But before he could put it away, the journal creaked open on its own. New writing bled onto the page, fresh ink appearing like veins drawing themselves. One word. "Listen." My throat tightened. Elias muttered, "That thing followed us." He grabbed metal tongs and took the book outside. Instead of burying it, he turned on the propane torch used for controlled burns. "Cover your ears," he warned. The moment flame touched the pages, the fire erupted, greenish-white, violent, almost alive. Something inside screamed, not loudly, but like a whisper pressed against bone. The voice wasn't a child this time. It was the same voice that spoke in the cabin. "He belongs to me. Caleb stays." My knees weakened. Elias didn't flinch. He watched until the book was ash, but ash didn't settle. It blew upward, dissolving into the air like something escaping. When we returned inside, neither of us spoke. Some things lose power when you name them. Some grow stronger. By the time dawn crept through the blinds of my small cabin housing, exhaustion dragged me under like undertow. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without dreaming of fire. But the peace didn't last. I woke suddenly, breath caught in my throat, chest crushed under invisible weight. I couldn't move, not even blink at first. Something cold pressed against me, heavier than fear. When the pressure finally released, I gasped and sat upright. My room was still, but something new sat on my nightstand. A small, muddy shoe. A child's shoe. Still wet, still warm. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside the heel, smudged in dried mud, someone had written, "Jonas heard me." A soft sound came from outside. Not crying this time. Laughing. Small. Playful, almost musical. I walked to the window slowly, every nerve screaming not to look. Just beyond the tree line, shadowed between pines, stood a small silhouette. Not moving, not approaching, just watching. The voice floated across the clearing like breath carried by fog. "Someone else is lost. Come help." I stepped back from the window, pulse racing. That night, I returned to duty, because routine helps when fear doesn't know where to land. Now, when I patrol, I wear industrial earplugs. Not to block wildlife, to block her. Because sometimes, far into the dark part of the forest, the part maps forgot, voices rise again. Sometimes the words shift. "Jonas, you shouldn't have listened." Other nights, another child wandered too far. But the worst nights are the quiet ones. Because silence in Witch Hollow is never empty. It means she's waiting. And she knows I can hear her. Not every voice calling for help is meant to be answered. Some places, and some entities, use compassion as bait. Trust your instincts. Set boundaries with the unknown. And remember, curiosity saves few, but lures many. I've worked night shifts for almost a decade, And I've hated every November since the night my fiancée died. People say grief softens with time, but mine hasn't. It sits buried deep, like an old root that keeps growing under the surface even after the tree is cut down. I was on duty the night she died. Responded to a call late. Turned out it was nothing. Kids setting off fireworks. While I was wasting time at that fake emergency, she was fighting for her life in a crushed Toyota on Route 9. By the time I got there, she was already fading. Her hand slipped away from mine before the paramedics even arrived. Since then, I've preferred working alone. It's easier that way. No one staring when I flinch at ambulance sirens or when I go silent for too long. The rookies always try to talk about sports or their girlfriends, and I don't have the patience for either. That night, November 14th, everything felt wrong from the moment I stepped out of my truck. The air had that metallic taste it gets before a lightning storm. The dispatch radio hissed with static between transmissions, and the woods lining Pine Ridge Highway looked darker than they should have been under a full moon. Around 2:47 a.m., I spotted the silver Ford Focus. It was parked sideways at the tree line like someone had slammed on the brakes and jumped out. The driver's door hung open a few inches. Red taillights glowed faintly, reflecting against the fog like warning eyes. My chest tightened. I'd seen too many accident scenes that started like this. Not tonight, I whispered to myself. I stepped out carefully, hand resting on my holster. The gravel crunched under my boots, but the sound was swallowed by the fog. The smell hit before the sight, rotting, sweet, like spoiled meat left in the trunk during summer. I leaned into the car, scanning it with my flashlight. Torn seats, a cracked phone, still unlocked on a text message. Fast food wrappers scattered across the floor. Blood, small smears on the console, droplets near the cup holder, streaks across the passenger seat. Not spatter, wiped. Someone had tried to clean. Then I noticed the trunk, partially open, a white towel wedged in the gap. I knew I shouldn't open it alone. Protocol said wait for backup. But something in my gut pushed me forward. I lifted the trunk and stared at a severed human hand, blackened with dried blood, fingers swollen, nails bitten down to the skin, 2 fingers bent so far backward they looked broken on purpose. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to gag. I forced my voice steady and radioed in. Coldwater Station, Unit 4, possible homicide evidence. Send backup and forensics. My voice cracked on the last word. I shut the trunk, stepped back, and that's when I saw movement in the fog. A person, running. All I saw was a flash, a tall, thin silhouette bolting into the woods. The movement was wrong, like their joints bent too freely, like a puppet with loose strings. They wore a heavy coat that flapped behind them as they disappeared between the pines. Without thinking, I yelled, "Stop! Police!" The figure didn't slow, didn't stumble, just glided deeper into the darkness. I reached for my radio again, but static swallowed my voice. That's when I noticed something else, something that turned my bones to ice. The figure had grabbed the driver's door with their left high hand, the same hand I'd just found severed in the trunk. I hesitated, gun drawn, but the shape vanished into the tree line before backup finally arrived. 1 sheriff unit, 2 deputies, and 2 canine teams. The handlers released the dogs. They rushed to the car, sniffing frantically. Then, they froze. 1 whimpered. The other tried to pull away. A third lifted its leg and urinated on the ground, refusing to move. "I've never seen him do that," the handler muttered, tightening the leash. We searched for hours, sweeping through the woods with flashlights and marking ribbons. The fog thinned as the sun rose, but we found nothing. No footprints, no broken twigs, no disturbed leaves, as if something had erased the trail behind it. By 6 a.m., the sheriff called it off. "Whatever you saw, it's long gone," he said, clapping my shoulder, trying to sound reassuring. But I knew what I saw, and nothing human moved like that. The case grew colder by the day. The silver Ford had been reported stolen from a Walmart nearly 70 miles away. The owner, a retired school teacher named Margaret Ellis, had no idea her car was missing until a deputy knocked on her door. The blood inside the car didn't match anyone in the national database. No fingerprints, no dental match, no missing persons, nothing. Whoever the hand belonged to had never existed in the system. I spent hours reviewing the dash cam footage, hoping the camera caught something my eyes had missed. When I finally saw the figure on the screen, I had to pause it. There, crystal clear, was the problem. The figure grabbed the car door with its left hand, the same left hand sitting in our evidence freezer. "Maybe the person had a glove," the sheriff said when I brought it up. "There was no glove," I replied. "Maybe you misremembered." "I know what I saw." He sighed and leaned back, pinching his nose. "Lucas, you haven't been sleeping well. This time of year is hard for you. Just take a breath." That was the moment I realized he didn't believe me. A week later, the sheriff closed the case. "Misidentification and stress," the official report said. "Evidence inconclusive. No threat to public safety." The severed hand was cataloged, sealed, and buried in the Coldwater Forensic Cemetery, a field where unclaimed remains were laid to rest. A small metal plaque marked its spot. John Doe, case file number 4187, left hand only. Everyone moved on, except me. Nights on Pine Ridge Highway grew stranger after that. Drivers reported seeing someone standing at the edge of the woods, always alone, always still. Some described a man. Some described something that wasn't quite a man. One teenage girl said she saw someone holding their left wrist like it hurt. Another driver said he almost stopped because he thought the person was signaling for help. But when he slowed down, the figure stepped back and vanished behind a tree. Each report made the hair stand on the back of my neck. I started driving with my high beams on, scanning the dark tree line. It felt like something was waiting for me to look away, like the woods were watching. Then, one night in early December, I saw it myself. I was driving past mile marker 12 when my headlights caught a shape near the ditch. A person, tall, unnaturally thin, stood completely still, facing the road. The figure's coat hung loosely, like empty fabric over a wire frame. Their right arm dangled. Their left arm ended at the wrist, fingers missing. My heart pounded against my ribs. "Show me your hands!" I shouted, stepping out with my weapon drawn. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, just watched. Then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, it lifted the stump of its left wrist toward me, as if offering it. I stepped back instinctively. In the time it took me to blink, the figure was gone, vanished into the pines without a sound. I didn't chase it. I didn't radio it in. I just got back in my car, locked the doors, and drove off with shaking hands. The last encounter happened on November 14th of the following year, almost exactly 12 months after I found the hand. I was parked near the old bridge on Pine Ridge Highway, filling out reports. The forest was silent, too silent. Then I heard it, a light tapping on my driver's side window. Tap, tap, tap. Cold spread through my chest. I slowly turned my head. A handprint smeared across the glass. A left hand, but not attached to anything, just a hand. Swollen, discolored, fingers bent, pressing itself against the window like it was searching for warmth. I stumbled out of the car, heart racing. The hand dropped to the ground with a wet thud. Something moved in the darkness behind me. A figure stepped into the faint glow of my taillights. Tall, wrong, bare wrist dripping mud, coat hanging like a shed skin. It spoke, or tried to. The voice wasn't right. Words slipped out like breaths carried by wind. "Give it back!" I froze. The hand twitched on the ground, dragging itself toward the figure like a dying spider. I didn't wait. I sprinted to the cruiser, slammed the door, and drove. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about explanations. I just drove until the forest was miles behind me. The next morning, I filed for a transfer. I haven't driven Pine Ridge Highway since. But sometimes, on cold nights, I still dream of a hand tapping on my window, looking for the arm it once belonged to. Grief can blind us, make us see danger where there is none, or ignore warnings we should not. But running from pain doesn't bury it. It follows like a shadow in the trees until we face what we've tried so hard to avoid. The past doesn't let go easily, but neither do we. To heal, we must confront what haunts us before it reaches back with cold hands. I worked the night shift at Deerfield Community Hospital on Thanksgiving Eve, 2021, something I never would have predicted a few years earlier. Art school used to be my life, but after my younger sister Rachel died in a car accident, every part of me that cared about colors, sketches, and dreams shut down. She had called me that night, asking for a ride home. I told her I was tired. She insisted she'd be fine. She wasn't. That guilt pulled me into healthcare, not out of passion, but obligation. If I couldn't save her, maybe I could save someone else. Deerfield was a small facility, the kind where everybody knew each other's habits, frustrations, and shortcuts. Wing C held our post-operative patients and an odd reputation. Call lights going off in empty rooms, motion detectors tripping with no movement, doors drifting shut without airflow. People joked about it. I didn't. On this particular night, the floor was unusually quiet. Only 7 patients, all sedated or asleep. Paul, the older nurse on staff, handled meds and charting. I handled the rounds and the heavier work. At 2:13 a.m., the overhead lights dimmed, and the building settled into its usual nocturnal hush. Then the first alert appeared. Room 419. Call light activated. I looked up sharply. Room 419 had been sealed for renovation. No bed, no equipment, no wiring connected to the call system. I radioed Paul. Got a call from 499. Static crackled before he answered. That room isn't even powered. Probably a glitch. Leave it. I might have listened, if the screen hadn't flashed again. Room 419. Call light activated, room 419. Bed exit alarm. My pulse quickened. The room didn't have a bed to exit. I grabbed my flashlight. The hallway felt colder than usual as I approached 419. The air itself seemed to tighten. The door was slightly ajar. Strange, considering maintenance had taped it shut earlier that week. When I pushed it open, the bare room greeted me with its stripped walls and empty floors. But in the far corner lay something that didn't belong. A patient call remote. Old, yellowed, frayed cord. Dried, rust-colored stains near the button. Before I could process that, alarms erupted behind me. Every call light along Wing C flashing in rhythm, room after room. Occupied, unoccupied, sealed. Everything. It felt like invisible hands were moving down the hall, pressing each button one by one. Then the alarms all died. A soft sound followed. Wheels, slow, dragging. I swung my flashlight toward the end of the corridor. A wheelchair rolled on its own. Someone sat in it, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a hospital bracelet hanging loosely from one wrist. The figure raised its head. When it spoke, the voice sounded thin, tired, and unbearably human. "Please," I pressed the button. "Why didn't anyone come?" My flashlight slipped from my hands. By the time I picked it up again, the figure was gone, disappeared, like smoke dissolving into air. Only the empty chair remained. Paul reached me moments later. When he saw nothing out of place, he insisted I must have seen a shadow, a trick of low light and exhaustion. His voice carried conviction without belief. He pushed the wheelchair into storage himself and locked the door. The rest of the shift passed in a tension-heavy quiet. I checked on patients more frequently than needed, trying to distract myself from the hollow voice asking a question I'd heard before, from my sister, in another form. Why didn't I come when she needed me? When morning staff relieved us, I clocked out and headed for the exit. That's when Tom, the maintenance head approached me. "You were near 419 last night, right?" he asked. I froze. "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "That room gives us trouble. Call lights triggering even though we disconnected it. Happens every few months. Started after the incident." "What incident?" I asked, though I already felt dread forming. Tom hesitated. "Old patient, long term, no family. His call button jammed or the system malfunctioned. We're not sure. He tried pressing it all night. They found him the next morning. He'd tried to get help himself, fell, and..." He stopped. My stomach twisted. "He pressed it so many times the lettering rubbed off," Tom said softly. "The old remote, the worn button, the wheelchair, the voice. Administration sealed the records," he continued. "Didn't want rumors starting." He walked away, leaving me with a truth that clung to my ribs. The ghost wasn't vengeance. He was grief. A forgotten patient who died asking for help that never came. Just like Rachel. And I hadn't answered either. I couldn't let it go. Even though I'd finished my shift, I returned that evening under the excuse of searching for my misplaced badge. The receptionist buzzed me in easily. The hospital felt different at night. Quieter, yes, but weighted. Wing C in particular carried a stillness that wasn't natural. Room 419's door, though retaped, hung slightly open, like someone had slipped through recently. I stepped inside. The cold returned instantly, not the HVAC kind, but something that seeped into bone. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Then the shadows in the corner shifted. Slowly, steadily, they gathered into a human form. The same figure from the wheelchair, thin, exhausted, hollow-eyed. But he didn't look threatening. He looked lost. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You called. Nobody came." The figure blinked, his expression softening like someone finally hearing what they'd waited for. He raised his hand slowly and pointed toward the wall behind me. I turned and saw faint outlines where a call button panel had once been mounted. Just a patch of discolored drywall and old screw holes. This wasn't a haunting. It was a place he had died trying to reach. "What do you want?" I asked gently. He couldn't speak. But he stepped toward the hallway, moving painfully slowly. I followed, keeping pace. We stopped at the nurse's station. The call light panel flickered. He reached toward it. Transparent fingers brushed the surface, and one amber light glowed softly, not flashing, not alarming. A normal patient call waiting to be answered. A call that mattered. "I'm here," I whispered. His shoulders relaxed. For a moment, his face seemed almost peaceful, no longer stretched tight with need. The hallway lights dimmed once, gently. Then he faded, like a sigh dissolving into air, and he was gone. After he disappeared, I stayed at the nurse's station, staring at the call panel until my breathing steadied. The building felt warm again, lived in rather than haunted. What stayed with me wasn't fear. It was the question he'd asked. "Why didn't anyone come?" It echoed with Rachel's voice beneath it, a voice I had ignored. For years, I had let my guilt calcify into a belief that I didn't deserve peace. But hearing that question from someone who had died utterly alone forced something inside me to crack. Maybe guilt isn't supposed to be a weight we carry forever. Maybe it's supposed to move us. During my next shift, I checked on patients more often. When they talked, I listened without rushing their words. I didn't scroll through my phone during quiet hours. I stayed alert, attentive, not out of fear of something supernatural, but because I understood now what it meant to be alone and unheard. 419 stayed calm. No lights, no temperature drops, no movement in the shadows. The air felt different, as if whatever had lingered there finally found its way out. A week later, construction crews prepared to convert 419 into storage. Before they sealed it for good, I stepped inside one last time. The air felt empty, not the haunting emptiness of before, but the blank, neutral emptiness of a room ready for a new purpose. Then I noticed something small on the floor near the wall. A screw. Old, rusted, marked with paint from the original call button panel. I picked it up and slid it into my pocket, not as a token of fear, just acknowledgement. A reminder to answer when someone calls. Later that night, a call light activated, room 412, a young woman recovering from an appendectomy. When I stepped in, she gave me an embarrassed smile. "Sorry, I got nervous. Didn't want to be alone." "You're not," I told her. "I'm right here." She relaxed instantly. I stayed with her longer than required, talking until her breathing evened out and her eyes grew heavy with sleep. On my way back to the nurse's station, the lights above 419 dimmed slightly, not flickering, not malfunctioning, more like an acknowledgement, a quiet, final thank you. After that night, nothing strange happened again on Wing C. Maintenance disconnected the old circuits, and the stories about 419 faded into forgotten staff gossip. But I never forgot the figure in the wheelchair, or the question that had followed me for years, wrapped in guilt and regret. Why didn't anyone come? I can't rewrite the night my sister needed me, but I can show up now. I can answer every call light. I can choose presence over avoidance. And sometimes, that's enough. We cannot undo our past failures, but we can decide how we respond from this moment forward. Healing begins when we listen, show up, and refuse to ignore the calls, spoken or silent, of the people who need us.